Hello, everyone. This is Dee Marley with the History Bards podcast. Thank you for joining us today. This week, we are interviewing historical author and actor Susan Wands, featuring her book, Magician and Fool. Hi, Susan. How are you doing today? We're so glad to have you.
I'm so happy to be here, and despite Mercury retrograde, we're actually being able to Zoom, so I'm thrilled.
Yeah, that's so great. We're really glad to have you. And as a way of a brief introduction for our listeners, Susan Wand, author of Magician and Fool, is an author as well as an actor and a graduate from the University of Washington. She has acted professionally across the United States and on Broadway. Her adaptation of Pride and Prejudice was produced at the Cornish Institute in Seattle, and she has written plays, screenplays, and skits and produced several indie films. She was also a company member in Rumble in the Red Room, an off-Broadway troupe, for 4 years. As co-chair with the New York City chapter of the Historical Novel Society, she helps produce monthly online book launches and author panels. Her writings have appeared in Art and Fiction, Kindred Spirits magazine, and the Irving Society journal First Night. She lives in New York City with her husband, actor Robert Petkoff, and her 2 cats, Flora and Flynn. Again, welcome to the show. And to get things started, Susan, we'd love to know more about your book, which I have to say has a very compelling cover.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled with the cover. Spark Press,
Yeah.
my publisher, did a fantastic job.
Yes, they did.
And because it's in a series, I've already approved book 2.
Oh,
And it's
gosh, awesome.
somewhat similar to book 1, but yes, I'm very happy with the way that they did the book cover. So that's been lovely.
That's great.
Yes, Magician and Fool was first published in 2017, but I didn't realize I was signing with a British publisher that only listed it online. And so after about a year, I took it down going, this was not the right way to do it. And thank goodness this happened, Dee, because it gave me time to rewrite the book.
Oh, good.
Yeah, a lot has happened in the world since 2015. And
Yes.
in terms of having a sensitivity reader, and because it was the first book in a series, a developmental editor showed me how to write the first book of a series to set some things in progress.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I rewrote the book and then resubmitted it. And I was very lucky that Brooke Warner at Spark Press picked it up and the second book.
Oh, that's great. So can you tell us more about the book itself, the storyline?
Yes, I'd love to. Pamela Colman Smith, she's been an obsession of mine for decades, is the creator of the modern tarot deck. And in this book, it follows Pamela from a young girl when she has these sort of psychic gifts. She had synesthesia, which we now understand is sort of a cross-hatching of the brain, but she could taste colors and see numbers in 3D. And actually, she saw fairies and other spirits. But, at that time, they just thought she was odd, but she was actually enormously gifted. And in this book, I track her first gifts when she was born in London, and her family goes to Jamaica, where she is taught by her guardian, Miss Jones, the folk tales, the Anne Nancy stories. And Pamela learns how to memorize stories and write and publish. And from that, she goes to the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and she starts writing some more. And then both her parents die before she's 20. And she sort of runs away and joins the circus by joining the Lyceum Theatre acting troupe with Henry Irving and sailing back to London.
Oh,
And
wow.
once she gets back in London, Bram Stoker sort of becomes her surrogate uncle and introduces her to a group of magicians who commission her to create this tarot deck. But there's one person in particular, Aleister Crowley, who's very unhappy that she's been given this commission, and he's going to do everything he can to destroy her ability to create. So that's the basic plot of Magician and Fool.
That sounds fascinating. I'm sure you did a lot of research with that. But before I get into that, I would love to know what, is in your bio, it talks about that you've been an actor for all of these years and everything. So what prompted you to get into writing historical fiction?
Well, it started out when I was adapting Jane Austen's work for Pride and Prejudice. And then when I moved to New York, I was adapting some of her juvenilia. And as I began to research Pamela's life, I tried to write a play about her, but it didn't encompass enough of her life. I mean, it's such a huge story that I've always written that I thought I'm going to try to write the first book about her 2 first muses. So I spent about 4 years with writing coaches and classes to write the first book of Magician and Fool as a historical novel. My husband always says that My superpower is research. My Achilles heel is POV. So,
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I think a lot of us historical fiction authors have that problem with research that we get so immersed in it.
yes, not
Yeah.
always a good thing, but
No,
that's
not always a good thing. It's
right.
fun. It's
Yes,
fun,
right.
but
Well, it doesn't
so
help your editor when you get so crazy about
no,
details. Yes.
no, it doesn't. So tell us more about that, about the research that you did. And was there anything obscure that you have happened to find?
Oh boy. Well, Dee, when I first started researching, there wasn't so much internet. That's how old I am. So I was doing libraries and asking for special permission by mail. And
Uh-huh.
once internet really caught fire, I was able to access all this fantastic stuff. I actually was able to have Pamela Colman Smith surviving family. They contacted
Oh,
me. I
wow.
went to their summer home and was able to see some artwork of Pamela's. But the oddest thing I discovered about Pamela Colman Smith is that her father is buried in Brooklyn because her grandfather was the mayor of Brooklyn. But also, what is buried in Brooklyn is Pamela's mother's leg, which was shipped from Jamaica after she died and buried in a plot in Brooklyn.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I think that has to top my weirdness research story.
Yeah, yeah. And why? I mean,
Well, this was a tradition that was done somewhat during the Civil War. There's a lot of Civil
yes.
War gravestones out there that
Uh-huh.
the family wanted whatever part of their poor soldier passed away in the war to be buried at home. Now,
Wow.
the other thing that could have happened is that in Jamaica, because colonial people weren't especially embraced, is that a Dupi or Jamaican witch hexed Pamela's mother. And
Mm.
in order to keep the curse from, going forward, they had to take a piece of her and
Oh,
bury her back in the country where she was born.
oh.
That's a
Well,
possibility, but I wasn't there, I don't know, but that's what my
yeah.
research has shown.
Well, that's actually a really interesting fact too. I
Yeah.
mean, that happened. Wow, that's really amazing. So I was going to ask you if you've ever traveled to any of the places. Have you been to Jamaica?
Yes, we've been to Jamaica, but I didn't get to go to any of the places where Pamela was because there was a huge earthquake in 1900,
Oh,
which pretty much leveled any ability for me to find their house
oh
or
wow.
any of that. But I did get to travel in 2017 with this Mystic Britain tour. And the person who was helming this is Mary Greer, who's like the authority in the tarot world. And she's also a tremendous resource for Pamela Colman Smith. And so we went to Bude in Cornwall to see where Pamela Colman Smith may have been buried. She died destitute in an unmarked grave. And
Oh,
then we went to Cornwall, where Tintagel has this Camelot castle, where
yeah,
supposedly Pamela met Henry Irving, who's a major character in my book,
yeah.
and auditioned for him, showing him her toy theater that had a production of Henry Morgan, the Jamaican pirate. So we did sort of a seance in the bar to kind of contact Pamela with a bunch of the psychic people that were there. And we had a terrific time sort of getting in touch with where Pamela lived when she lived on the west coast of the United Kingdom.
Oh, that's really amazing. Well, I have to say that I'm really jealous now because that's one on my bucket list to go to Cornwall and to Tintagel. So, because that's actually part of my book as well. So,
Oh, is that right?
yes, yes. So that's always been on my bucket list. I've been to England several times or Britain several times, but I've never gotten out to Cornwall yet. So,
It's so special, Dee. I think you'll
yeah,
really love it.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm so that's so great that you got to do that. So let me ask you this, in all of the writing that you did, do you have a favorite passage from your own book that you could share?
I actually do. It's just a couple lines.
Okay.
But, when Pamela was meeting her nemesis, Aleister, they came from such two different worlds. Aleister went to university and came from a fairly wealthy family. Pamela was an orphan. They're both trying to get started with the Golden Dawn and who was going to get the commission for this tarot deck. So at the very first meeting between Aleister and Pamela, it sort of went like this. Aleister approached, trying to get Ellen Terry's attention at the same time. He finally looked down at Pamela. So, you're a Smith, are you? Fairly common name, isn't it? More universal than common, I think, Pamela replied cheerfully. And so that to me just sort of summed up their differences. You
Yeah.
know, Pamela's saying, yes, I'm a Smith, the generic name from someone. And she sees that as a more reaching out to everyone rather than saying, oh, you're working class, you're not leisure or titled class. And
Mhm.
I really like the differences between them on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really fascinating. Well, so let me ask you that. So that was your favorite. So can you tell us more about what you found was most difficult to write about this book?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Um, I think controversial. I mean, part of the reason Dee I asked for a sensitivity reader because Brooke also encouraged that is because Pamela Colman Smith, when you see photographs of her, she doesn't necessarily look Caucasian. She looks like she could possibly be mixed race. Now, talking to her family, they're adamant that she was born to two white American citizens from Brooklyn, and she was born in London. And Pamela Colman Smith herself has become quite the icon in the Tarot community. First of all, because she looks other, and then she never married. And she was in the society of a lot of women in Victorian and Edwardian England at the time who were women who were having relationships with other women. So Pamela has become sort of a touchstone for women of race and who are gay. And so I had to be very mindful in writing her not to dismiss what she looks like and yet leaving it open to what the facts are, that it's not proved one way or the other, but it's how modern eyes are discerning her. So thank goodness I had two really terrific sensitivity readers talk to me about it's a touchy subject, and yet I need to honor how people are perceiving her today. So I think that for me was the needed the most authenticity and sensitivity in writing about who Pamela was. And
Right.
I was also just so fortunate in the audiobook. My husband, who has done over 350 audiobooks, Robert Peckoff is one of the top audiobook recorders. So I wanted a man's voice, but I also wanted a woman's voice. And he has worked several times with January Lavoie, who they do the Star Trek books together, in addition to the
Oh.
hundreds of books she also does. But she is this fantastic audiobook narrator who can do an accent from anywhere in the world.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she's also a woman of color. So when she is doing the Jamaican stories, when she is telling the stories that need the authenticity of someone who can bring that to it, I feel like I'm so fortunate to bring that to the story of Pamela Colman Smith as well.
Oh, well, you're in a position where that's awesome to be able to find somebody to narrate your book like that.
So
It's
lucky.
yeah, and then to hear that when you hear your characters come to life like that, it's
Oh my gosh. Just a little thing like you write a character has a slight lisp and is a little spinsterish, and then you hear how January did it, and I went, oh my gosh, nailed it.
yeah. I
Yeah.
had the same experience with my first book. Whenever I found my narrator, it was brilliant. It just
Isn't
gave
that
me
right?
chills. Yeah, it
Yes.
gave me chills. Well, let me ask you this. There's a lot of younger people starting out in historical fiction. When you look back on your younger self and wanting to write historical fiction, what advice would you give yourself that might help somebody else?
Gosh, I think the best piece of advice I got from one of my writing teachers said, not everyone is going to be your audience. So write for your audience. And the other thing she said was, no guts, no glory.
Yes.
So, you need to take risks in writing and realize that not everything is, if you're writing a genre like historical fiction, especially since mine has paranormal and alternate history in it, there's going to be some people who really like historical fiction, very factual, stick to the
Yes.
facts.
Yes.
This is not necessarily going to be their cup of tea. And I've just had to learn to embrace that. And I think as a younger writer, I spent so much time trying to, cross genre the book,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then just write it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. There was a mentor I had that said, if it's a good book, you can break the rules. And
That's right.
yeah, so
That's
whenever
right.
it's a good story and it meets the audience's needs, that you know what your audience is, then you can break some of those rules.
And I think knowing the rules helps, you know.
Yes, it
So,
does.
and once you know the rules and you go, well, if I've really done my research and really done, good writing, then we're going to make this happen.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, do you have a favorite saying or quote that you live by?
Oh gosh. I remember I looked at that. Oh, I guess my favorite saying that I always say to myself is just recharge, reset.
Mm,
Because it's very easy to get stuck in a pattern.
yes.
Reinventing yourself as a writer sometimes is really hard, especially for me
Yes.
writing this series. Something that I did in the past doesn't work. And so being flexible to me is my biggest challenge.
Mm.
Not getting stuck, not thinking that I have to adhere to rules in the past. So recharge, reset is sort of my get it going phrase.
And that's a good mantra for anybody. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially with us all going through the pandemic and everything, and being able to reset and recharge. That's a hard thing for a lot of us to have learned.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. So, do you have any advice about that was given to you along this journey um,
Well,
from
I think that the
mentors?
biggest thing I had was uh, share your work.
Mhm.
Don't write in a vacuum and then just hand it off. I just didn't realize how many times I would have to write a draft or a version of the book.
Yes, that's very true.
Oh my gosh. Even at the end, when Shannon Green at SparkPress was going, we need to blah, 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 rewrite this, re-edit it. I went, how? How could this?
Yes.
So it's hard to see it as a living, breathing fabric until it's actually stitched together.
Right.
Because, as an actor, I'm used to preparing a role, performing the role, and then going out with those words. And as a writer, I've had to reset, recharge the idea that this is going to be an amoeba that's going to grow with other people, beta readers, editors, ideas, feedback until it's finished. And it's never
Right.
finished when I thought it was finished.
Right. Yeah, I do understand that. And that is a really hard thing for younger writers to grasp. That sometimes and I remember I did it too, like as a young writer, I was so attached to things I didn't want to let it go.
Yes, or you say it's finished, and then you have
Yeah,
other people saying it certainly is not finished.
right.
And I think being open to uh, beta readers and editors, especially as a young author and a mentor writer. I mean, for
Yeah,
me, it's always been important to find, writing that I love and go, oh my gosh, look at that. I wish I
yeah,
could write like that. I mean, I
yeah,
think you have to know what your genre is and be up on it and know what the market is. And sometimes I think in today, it just seems like you watch these Buffy the Vampire Slayer movies and she moves into an office, she gets magic, and she's running the corporation in 2 weeks. So it's hard sometimes. I've seen, especially with my younger parts of my family, that what do you mean I have to learn? I can't do this at 20.
yeah,
So I totally get. I love the fact that there's ambition and energy and take charge, but the fact that there is a curve usually. I mean, some
yeah.
people just come out the gate geniuses,
I
but
know.
yeah, for most of us, it's a slog.
That's it. That's absolutely it. We're in the majority.
Yes.
Well, do you have anything? What's coming up new for you? I know you said that you are working. Are you working on the sequel, or is it getting?
Well, the sequel's already in final edits with Spark
Okay.
Press. It's the second two tarot cards. It's the High Priestess and Empress. So that book is in final looks. The
Okay.
third book, Emperor and Hierophant, I'm working with my two writing groups to get it shored up. And now I have to start the fourth book. The fourth book is like terrifying because I have to cast the muses to the tarot cards, and sometimes they change. So, I have to really, it's like riding a horse. Sometimes it gallops and gets away from me, and other times it's
Yeah.
just standing there going, nope, not moving.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah. So, are you having any author events coming up?
Yes, actually, a week from today is the launch, the publishing date of Magician and Fool.
Oh, great.
I'm so thrilled because I'm going to be at this place in the East Village called the Book Club Bar. And it's this
Oh,
really fun, funky bar and bookstore that in the back has a reading room. And so we're going to have people there. We're going to have tarot readers. I'm going to give away a free tarot reading. Some of my favorite writers are actually going to be there too. And then later in the week, I have two events in Chicago on the same day. I'm going to be at Barbara's Bookstore in Lombard, Illinois on Saturday the 6th. And then that night, I'm going to scuttle back into Chicago and go near Lincoln Park to go to this fabulous little place called Sideshow Gallery. And Letitia Barbier, who runs Morbid Anatomy, is going to be hosting my talk there. So that's going to be really,
yeah. Awesome. Well, you'll have to send me the links for those, and we'll definitely put that in the description. And that way the listeners, if they're nearby, that they can come see you and, get a signed book from you.
That'd be great. And maybe you'll win a tarot reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for being on the show today. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Dee. This was just a delight.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners, we thank you and ask that you please click the subscribe button. And once again, you can learn more about Susan and her books at www.susanwands.com. We hope everyone enjoyed the episode today, and tune in next week's show when we interview historical author Eileen Joyce Donovan with her featured book, The Campbell Sisters. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep making history and keep listening.